Imagine a world where the air itself begins to change, where the seasons stretch longer and colder, until summer feels like a fleeting memory. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the planet cools. But what begins as a shift in temperature becomes something far greater, a transformation that will reshape continents, seas, and even the destiny of life itself. This is the story of the coming of the ice. Glaciers, vast, unstoppable rivers of frozen time, begin to grow. Snow that falls in one winter never fully melts in the next. Layer upon layer builds, compressing under its own weight until mountains of ice rise from the land. These are not gentle landscapes. They are worlds unto themselves, miles thick, grinding and groaning with a slow, relentless power. Across the northern hemisphere, the Laurentide ice sheet spreads across North America, smothering everything beneath it. Forests vanish, valleys disappear, even mountains bend to the pressure of this icy titan. At its height, it will cover nearly all of Canada and stretch deep into the northern United States, a frozen empire of unimaginable scale. On the other side of the world, the Fennoscandian ice sheet spreads across northern Europe. It swallows Norway, Sweden, Finland, and beyond. It grinds its way southward, crushing the land beneath and pushing life to the very edges of survival. What once were fertile lands become deserts of ice and wind, their silence broken only by the cracking of glaciers as they creep forward inch by inch, year by year, century by century. But the power of ice is not just in what it covers, it is also in what it reveals. As the glaciers expand, water is locked away in their frozen depths. Oceans begin to shrink, sea levels fall, exposing vast new landscapes. Where there had once been rolling waves, land bridges now appear. Asia and North America are joined by the Bering Land Bridge, painting a path that would one day carry humans and animals into a new world. In Southeast Asia, shallow seas retreat, connecting islands into sprawling landmasses. Across the globe, coastlines redraw themselves, and the shape of Earth itself begins to change. But these exposed lands are not gentle meadows waiting to be settled. They are harsh, wind-swept plains, blasted by cold air rushing off the glaciers. With the seas pulled back and the land bare, the winds gather dust, fine, choking particles of ground-up rock left behind by the grinding glaciers. This dust is carried for thousands of miles, drifting like ghostly veils across the horizon. It settles into thick blankets across the continents, creating vast deposits known as loess plains. These plains will one day become some of the richest farmlands on Earth. But in this moment, they are barren and strange. A reminder that every gift of the future is born from struggle in the past. What would it have felt like to stand there, to watch the world sink into cold? The forests that once stretched endlessly now retreat southward. Animals follow, driven to new territories in search of food. The great mammoths, wrapped in thick coats of fur, march across the steppe. Herds of bison move in dark rivers across the horizon, their hooves pounding the frozen ground. Predators, saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, cave lions, trail behind, their eyes reflecting the dim light of an endless winter sky. And scattered among them, humans, small bands of hunters and gatherers, caught between the unrelenting ice to the north and the shifting landscapes to the south. Their fires flicker against the cold wind. Their survival hangs in the balance, shaped not only by their ingenuity, but by the raw power of the climate itself. Did they know what was happening? Could they sense that the Earth was entering an age unlike any before? Or did it simply feel like the world was closing in around them, one winter at a time? The coming of the ice was not a single event. It was a slow tightening of nature's grip, a long breath held across thousands of years. The planet cooled, the ice advanced, the seas fell, and with every passing generation, the Earth itself was rewritten. But this was only the beginning. The glaciers were not finished. Their weight would carve valleys and lakes, grind mountains into rubble, and create landscapes that still shape our lives today. They would test every creature that lived, forcing adaptation, migration, or extinction. And they would leave behind a legacy that whispers to us even now, in the hills, in the rivers, in the dust beneath our feet. The age of ice had arrived, and with it, the stage was set for one of the most dramatic chapters in the history of our planet. The Ice Age did not arrive by accident. It was not a sudden whim of nature, but the result of forces so vast and intricate that even now they seem almost unfathomable. To understand how our world slipped into frozen silence, we must look not only to Earth itself, but to the heavens above, the fire beneath, and the delicate feedbacks that turned small changes into an unstoppable cascade. The story begins not with ice, but with orbits. Earth does not circle the sun in a perfect clockwork rhythm. Instead, it wobbles, tilts, and shifts in cycles that unfold over tens of thousands of years. These are the Milankovitch cycles, named after the Serbian scientist who first unraveled their mysteries in the early 20th century. Imagine the planet as a great spinning top, its axis tilting back and forth, its orbit stretching into long ellipses and then tightening again, its spin wobbling like a dancer, slowing down. Each subtle shift changes how sunlight falls across the Earth. Summers grow cooler in the northern hemisphere, winters harsher and longer. Snow that once melted away now lingers, reflecting more sunlight back into space. And with less warmth absorbed, the planet cools still further. A chain reaction has begun, sparked by the faintest tilt of Earth's path around the sun. But orbital shifts alone cannot explain the depth of the freeze. Other forces join the conspiracy. Volcanoes, those fiery vents of Earth's restless heart, erupt with a fury that blots out the sky. Great clouds of ash and sulfur rise into the stratosphere, spreading like veils across the planet. For months, even years, they reflect sunlight back into space, dimming the warmth of the sun. Imagine looking up and seeing a sky that glows not blue, but pale and hazy, the sun a weak disk, struggling to pierce the veil. Every eruption adds a temporary chill, a brief shiver in the climate's pulse, but in an agon, already drifting toward ice. Those shivers add up. And then there are the oceans. Vast, deep, and slow to change. They hold more secrets than any glacier. During the onset of the Ice Age, currents shifted. Warm waters sank into the depths, trapped beneath colder layers above. Heat that once circulated across the globe was buried, hidden far below the surface. Without that transfer of warmth, winters grew longer, summers shorter, and the chill spread further than before. The oceans, normally the great regulators of climate, became accomplices in the march of ice. Still, these forces might have faded in time, had it not been for the feedback loops that magnified their effects. As the ice sheets spread, they transformed the very nature of the Earth. Snow and ice reflect sunlight far more effectively than bare ground or open water. The more the ice grew, the more heat was bounced back into space, and the colder the world became. This is the albedo effect, a simple but relentless amplifier of chill. Meanwhile, Vegetation retreated before the advancing cold. Grasslands shrank, forests withdrew. With fewer plants to absorb carbon dioxide, the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere fell. Less carbon meant less heat trapped in the sky, and the cycle of cooling spun faster still. Even the dust storms played their part. Fine particles carried by the wind dimmed the skies and settled on snow, changing the way sunlight was reflected and absorbed. It was as if the planet itself had conspired to freeze. A nudge from the heavens, a shadow from volcanoes, a silence in the oceans, and then the feedback loops of ice and air sealing the transformation. But why did these forces align when they did? Was it simple coincidence? Or is there a deeper rhythm, a hidden heartbeat in the Earth's long story, where cycles of ice and warmth repeat across the ages? These are questions we still wrestle with today. What we do know is that once the balance tipped, there was no stopping it. Generation after generation was born into a world slipping further into cold. To those who lived through it, there was no knowledge of orbital mechanics, no understanding of atmospheric chemistry. There was only the endless winter. Each year the snows lingered longer, the winds grew sharper, the herds moved further in search of food. For them, the Ice Age was not theory, it was survival. And yet, from our vantage point now, we see the delicate interplay of cosmic and earthly forces that sculpted this frozen world. Forces that remind us how small shifts in the heavens can reshape the destiny of the planet. Forces that show us how fragile the balance of climate truly is. The coming of the ice was no accident. It was written in the tilt of the earth, the fire of its volcanoes, the silence of its oceans, and the mirror of its glaciers. The stage was set, the curtain drawn, and the frozen age began its long and patient reign. But the Ice Age was not just about the forces that brought the cold. It was about what came next. The landscapes carved, the creatures tested, and the humans who stood at the edge of extinction, yet endured. The freeze was only the beginning. The Ice Age was not only a story of frozen landscapes and advancing glaciers. It was also a test of survival, of endurance, of adaptation. When the world grew cold, life had two choices: change or vanish. Forests that once stretched thick and green began to shrink back, retreating like armies driven before a greater power. Towering oaks and endless pines gave way to open plains where icy winds howled without mercy. In their place rose a new kind of ecosystem, one of hardy grasses and low shrubs, plants that could endure the cold, the dryness, and the thin soils left behind by the glaciers. This was the birth of the Mammoth Steppe Bay, one of the most extraordinary environments Earth has ever known. Vast, windswept, stretching across Europe, Asia, and North America, it was a frozen sea of grass where survival meant constant movement and endless endurance. But who would rule this strange, icy kingdom? It was here that some of the most iconic creatures of the Ice Age rose to power. The mighty woolly mammoth, cloaked in thick fur and standing taller than a modern elephant, trudged in herds across the endless plains. Their long, curved tusks carved paths through snowdrifts, their massive bodies shielding young calves from the wind. Close cousins, the mastodons, roamed the forests that still clung to the edges of the ice, feeding on bark and branches with grinding teeth built for tough diets. Alongside them grazed bison, larger and wilder than the ones we know today, thundering across the steppe in vast herds that shook the frozen ground. Musk oxen, shaggy and stoic, huddled together in circles against the blizzards, while reindeer, the ancestors of today's caribou, migrated tirelessly, following the cycle of the seasons. These were the survivors, creatures shaped not just by strength, but by clever design. Thick coats of fur insulated them. Layers of fat carried them through lean winters. Herd instincts gave protection against predators. The Ice Age was harsh, but it was also a grand stage for evolution, and those who adapted thrived. But where there are herds, there are hunters. The mammoth steppe was no safe haven. It was a battlefield, and predators of almost mythical reputation stalked its frozen plains. Dire wolves, larger and more powerful than the wolves of today, hunted in packs, their teamwork turning the tide against even the largest prey. Imagine the echo of their howls rolling across the icy steppe, a sound both haunting and lethal. Then there were the saber-toothed cats, with fangs like daggers, perfectly adapted for delivering a killing strike. They were ambush predators, lurking in the shadows of forests or rocky ridges, waiting for the moment to lunge. Their very image has become a symbol of the Ice Age, a predator forged for a dangerous world. And towering above them all were the cave lions, some of the largest cats ever to walk the earth. Unlike the solitary hunters of today, these lions may have lived and hunted in groups, overwhelming prey with sheer power. Their presence was immortalized by early humans, who painted their forms on cave walls, proof of both fear and respect. Every creature, from the smallest rodent tunneling beneath the snow to the towering mammoth, played a role in this frozen drama. Together, they created an ecosystem balanced on the knife's edge of survival. The grasses fed the herds fed the predators, and the predators shaped the herds in turn. Life was locked in a constant struggle, each generation forced to adapt or perish. But think of this. Would we recognize this world if we saw it today? Imagine standing on a ridge in Ice Age Siberia, the horizon stretching endless and white. Below you, herds of mammoths move like ships across the frozen grasslands. In the distance, a pack of dire wolves stalks their trail. Overhead, the wind carries dust and snow, stinging the skin and blurring the line between earth and sky. It is a landscape both alien and familiar. For though this world feels long vanished, its echoes remain with us still. Reindeer still wander the tundras of the north. Musk oxen still form their protective circles in the Arctic. Bison still thunder across the plains of North America. Even the wolves, though smaller now, still carry the same instincts, the same pack bonds, the same haunting howl. The Ice Age tested them, and the survivors carry its legacy in their blood. But this story was not only about animals. In the shadows of the mammoth steppe, another creature was learning to endure. Smaller than the great beasts, lacking fur or fangs or speed, it relied on something different: intelligence, cooperation, and tools. That creature was us. As the Ice Age deepened, humans stepped onto this frozen stage. They too would face the cold, the hunger, and the predators. And in doing so, they would begin to shape not just their own fate, but the destiny of the entire planet. The animals of the Ice Age remind us of one thing: life is resilient. When the world changes, life finds a way to change with it. And in the frozen silence of the Ice Age, that truth was written in the tracks of mammoths, the howls of wolves, and the shadows of lions on the snow. The Ice Age was a kingdom of giants. Step onto its windswept plains, and the first thing you would notice is scale. The horizon stretches wider, the sky feels higher, and the creatures that roam the land seem larger than life. This was a world where survival wasn't quiet or hidden. It thundered, marched, and breathed in clouds of frost. Across the endless grasslands of Eurasia and North America, herds of woolly mammoths moved like living fortresses, covered in shaggy coats of hair and weighing as much as 10 tons. They trudged in groups that stretched as far as the eye could see. Their curved tusks, some longer than a grown man, carved paths through snowdrifts and dug deep into the frozen ground in search of roots and grasses. Imagine the earth trembling beneath your feet as hundreds of these giants passed, their footsteps shaking the silence of the steppe. To watch them was to glimpse the very heartbeat of the Ice Age. But the mammoths were not alone. In the shadowed edges of the forests roamed their cousins, the mastodons. Stockier, shorter, and built for browsing rather than grazing, mastodons stripped bark from trees and tore branches with teeth designed for crushing wood and leaves. Their presence kept the forests in check, shaping the boundaries between woodland and plain. Picture the sound of splintering trees as a mastodon herd moved through, an ancient reminder that these giants weren't gentle caretakers of the land, but powerful forces within it. Then there were the reindeer, tireless travelers of the tundra. Their migrations were endless, stretching across thousands of miles. Year after year, they followed invisible trails carved by instinct and memory, moving in vast herds that mirrored the turning of the seasons. Where they went, predators followed, packs of dire wolves on their heels, cave lions waiting at choke points, saber-toothed cats lying in ambush. And for the hunters, the herds were lifelines, the rhythm of their survival tied directly to the endless march of reindeer across the frozen earth. It was a cycle as old as the Ice Age itself. The grass fed the herds fed the predators, and the predators kept the balance. A fragile, brutal harmony, played out beneath skies heavy with snow. And above it all loomed something even greater. The glaciers, rising like frozen walls, these sheets of ice stretched for thousands of miles, reshaping entire continents as they advanced. Imagine standing at their edge, staring up at cliffs of ice higher than any cathedral, their faces gleaming blue where the sun struck deep. They groaned and shifted, their weight grinding mountains into dust and carving valleys that rivers would one day fill. Entire landscapes disappeared beneath them, swallowed by the slow, relentless crawl of ice. The glaciers weren't silent spectators. They were architects. They redirected rivers, scoured plains, and left behind the bones of mountains ground to rubble. Every meltwater stream that poured from their bases was a river of transformation, carrying stones, silt, and life into the world beyond. Even as they froze the land, they shaped the future. In such a world, everything felt monumental. The beasts, the herds, the predators, even the very land itself, it was all written on a scale we can hardly imagine today. But let's pause and ask, what would it have been like to stand there, to walk across the mammoth steppe as one of us? The ground would crunch beneath your boots, the air sharp with cold, carrying the smell of snow and musk. Ahead, you might see a herd of mammoths, mothers shielding calves in their midst, tusks gleaming in the pale sun. To your right, mastodons break branches, their silhouettes framed against the dark edge of a forest. And across the horizon, a line of reindeer moves steadily, their hooves leaving a trail that stretches beyond sight. Behind them, silent shadows follow, wolves, patient, waiting for weakness. And then, in the distance, the glacier itself. A wall of ice, unmoving yet alive, groaning with hidden cracks, releasing a steady trickle of meltwater that will one day carve a valley floor. Standing before it, you'd feel small, not just in body, but in time. For these glaciers did not move in years, or even centuries, but in millennia. They were the frozen breath of the planet itself. The giants of the Ice Age remind us of something essential. Nature is not always subtle. It is not always gentle. Sometimes it is grand and overwhelming, a force that commands awe as much as fear. The mammoths and mastodons, the migrating herds, the looming glaciers, they were not background scenery. They were the stage itself. And yet, for all their power, they were not eternal. The world they ruled was fragile, balanced on shifting climates and changing skies. Already, unseen forces were moving in the deep oceans, in the tilt of Earth's orbit, in the breath of volcanoes. The Ice Age giants seemed invincible, but time was already writing their fate. Still, for tens of thousands of years, they thrived. And they walked the plains, roared in the forests, and left their marks on the very land we inhabit today. Their bones still lie beneath our feet. Their stories are written in cave paintings, in fossils, and in the valleys, carved by ice. And when we imagine them, moving across endless white horizons, framed against the thunder of glaciers, we are reminded that Earth is capable of grandeur beyond measure. The Ice Age was a frozen kingdom, and the giants were its rulers. But their reign was only part of the story. Another creature was waiting in the wings, small, fragile, yet armed with fire, tools, and a mind restless enough to challenge the cold. The giants ruled the land, but soon they would meet us. Imagine a world locked in frost, a place where the air bites like a living thing. Rivers are frozen solid for months, and the ground itself is a mosaic of ice and snow. The Ice Age was not simply cold, it was relentless. Every breath, every step, every heartbeat demanded adaptation. Life, in every form, had to evolve or vanish. Across this frozen expanse, animals were nature's ultimate survivors. They developed thick, shaggy coats, layers of insulating fat, and even subtle changes in blood flow to survive the bitter temperatures. Musk oxen, wrapped in woolly armor, could endure winds that would chill a human to the bone. Reindeer and caribou evolved hooves that acted like snowshoes, allowing them to traverse treacherous icy plains. Even predators were shaped by the cold. Dire wolves with massive paws padded for snow, cave lions whose muscular forms conserved heat, and saber-toothed cats whose hunting strategies shifted with the scarcity of prey. Every creature was a story of adaptation. Every step they took was a negotiation with the harshness of a frozen world. But among these giants and predators, another species was learning the art of survival, the earliest humans. For them, the Ice Age was not a backdrop, it was life itself. Humans walked these plains armed not with the comfort of warmth, but with ingenuity, cooperation, and a relentless curiosity. They relied on the giants of the land, mammoths, bison, and reindeer, for more than just sustenance. Mammoth bones became the skeletons of shelters, their hides shields against the wind, their fat burned as fuel for fires that kept death at bay. Every hunt was a calculated risk, a dance with creatures far larger and more dangerous than themselves. It was a world where resilience was the currency of life. Every meal gathered, every fire maintained, every tool sharpened mattered. Humans learned to read the subtle signs of the land, the tracks in the snow that hinted at prey, the behavior of predators that could reveal danger, the whispers of the wind that spoke of approaching storms. They became keen observers, not merely hunters, but students of an environment that demanded constant vigilance. And yet, survival was never just about brute strength or sharp tools. It was about adaptation on every level. Early humans began to develop clothing from furs, sewing together layers of animal hides to stave off frostbite. They fashioned weapons from bone and stone, designed for efficiency rather than brute force. They created fire, not just for warmth, but as a signal, a protection, and a method of cooking food that strengthened their bodies against the cold. Even their social structures reflected the demands of the Ice Age. Communities were small but tightly knit, bound together by shared knowledge and cooperation. The hunt of a mammoth was not a solo endeavor. It was a coordinated ballet, requiring communication, timing, and trust. To survive, humans had to understand not only the giants of the land, but each other. Every individual was both a contributor to survival and a vessel of accumulated wisdom, passed down through generations. But the Ice Age was not merely a teacher. It was also a relentless test. Seasons were brutal and unforgiving. Winters stretched longer than memory. Snowstorms could blanket entire valleys, and rivers could freeze into treacherous mazes of ice. Animals migrated endlessly, driven by instinct and survival. Humans had to follow them or find other means to endure. There were no shortcuts, no guarantees. Only those who learned to adapt thrived. It is in this crucible of frost that humans first demonstrated something profound: the ability to transform their environment rather than simply be transformed by it. By using fire, shelter, and tools, they created small pockets of stability within an otherwise chaotic world. These innovations didn't erase the dangers of the Ice Age. They simply gave them a fighting chance. Every fire pit, every cave dwelling, every spear left behind tells the story of resilience, of a species learning to survive alongside giants. And yet humans were not merely survivors. They were participants in the ecology of the Ice Age. Every hunt shaped animal populations. Every migration followed the rhythms of the land. Humans were learning the patterns of predator and prey, of snow and thaw, of life and death. They were not separate from the frozen world. They were entwined with it. Pause for a moment and picture it. A small band of hunters huddled near a fire as snow falls softly around them. Beyond the flickering flames, the silhouettes of mammoths graze in the twilight. Dire wolves roam the distance, aware of the humans but unwilling to confront them directly. The humans work silently, maintaining the fire, sharpening their tools, watching, learning, surviving. Every sense is heightened. Every decision matters. This is not just existence. It is mastery in miniature. A demonstration of intelligence, adaptability, and the raw will to endure. The Ice Age demanded more than strength. It demanded ingenuity. It forced early humans to expand their minds as much as their bodies. Tools became extensions of themselves. Fire became a companion, a weapon, a beacon. Knowledge passed from one generation to the next became a lifeline. The frozen world was harsh, indifferent, and unyielding, but it also forged humans into what they would become. And in the shadows of ice, a paradox emerges. The harsh, saint environments produced some of the most profound adaptations. The giants of the Ice Age roamed, vast and unstoppable. Predators stalked the plains. Rivers froze and thawed. Glaciers crept forward, reshaping the land. And yet, amid all this, humans survived. They thrived, not through sheer force, but through observation, collaboration, and an uncanny ability to turn the world to their advantage. This chapter of Earth's history reminds us that survival is never given. It is earned. That in the most hostile places, life will find a way, not by brute strength alone, but through ingenuity, resilience, and adaptability. The shadows of ice were long, cold, and unforgiving. Yet within them, humans not only survived, they began to shape their destiny. The frozen world of the Ice Age may seem distant, unimaginable, and alien. But its lessons echo even today. Life endures, life adapts, and in the quiet, frozen shadows, the first sparks of human ingenuity were born, setting the stage for a world yet to come. The Ice Age world was not frozen in silence. It pulsed, it shifted, it breathed. For all its stillness, the climate of Earth was never steady. Glaciers did not simply form and sit in place like monuments. They advanced, crept forward across the land, and then, sometimes suddenly, sometimes slowly, retreated, revealing valleys, rivers, and plains in their wake. Like a tide too vast for human eyes to measure, the ice moved in rhythm, with forces far older and greater than any life upon the planet. But what controlled this strange heartbeat of the Earth? Why did the glaciers grow, only to fade again? The answer lies not upon the ground, but in the heavens. Every planet spins, and every orbit is a dance. For Earth, that dance is not perfect. Our orbit stretches and relaxes, growing more oval, then more circular over cycles that last tens of thousands of years. The tilt of our axis wobbles, sometimes leaning a little more, sometimes a little less, changing how sunlight strikes the northern and southern hemispheres. Even the slow wobble of the planet itself, like a child's top slowing down, shifts the timing of the seasons. These movements are known as Milankovitch cycles, named after the scientist who pieced together their vast and patient patterns. On their own, they seem subtle, almost imperceptible. But stretched across millennia, their effects are enormous. Imagine a summer in the far north. If Earth tilts just a little less toward the sun, the days are cooler. Snow that falls in winter does not fully melt away. It lingers, year after year, piling up until ice sheets grow larger, thicker, heavier. Conversely, when the tilt increases, summers grow stronger, snow retreats, and ice pulls back. It is a planetary scale seesaw, one controlled not by human hands, but by the delicate geometry of Earth's path around its star. But here is the mystery. Orbital shifts alone are but enough to explain the Ice Age's full power. Something else magnified these changes, turning small nudges into colossal transformations. That something was feedback. Earth's climate is not a simple machine. It is a web of connections, where every strand tugs at another. When ice expands, its white surface reflects sunlight back into space. The planet cools further. The colder it becomes, the more oceans absorb carbon dioxide, stripping greenhouse gases from the air and lowering the planet's ability to hold warmth. That drop in CO2 cools the Earth even more, feeding the growth of the glaciers. A chain reaction begins. But the pendulum swings both ways. When orbital shifts tilt Earth back toward warmth, glaciers shrink. Dark land and open water emerge, absorbing sunlight instead of reflecting it. Warmer oceans release their trapped carbon dioxide back into the air. Greenhouse gases rise, holding in heat, accelerating the retreat of the ice. Cooling feeds cooling, warming feeds warming, and the planet swings between the two, as if caught in the breath of some vast and ancient being. Pause and consider this. Every glacier you see today, every valley carved by ice, Every stone smoothed by a glacier's hand was shaped by this quiet rhythm of sunlight, ice, and air. Without it, the Ice Age as we know it could never have been. Yet the rhythm was not always smooth. Sometimes it faltered. Short bursts of warming pierced the cold. Sudden chills dropped temperatures in a matter of decades. Volcanoes could throw ash into the atmosphere, dimming sunlight and tipping the scales toward cold. Oceans, shifting currents in their depths, could redistribute heat, plunging some regions into snow while others thawed. Even the collapse of glacial lakes, when ice dams gave way, could flood the oceans and alter global climate for centuries. For the creatures of the Ice Age, these swings were more than abstract patterns. They were the difference between survival and death. Herds of mammoths, bison, and reindeer marched southward when cold deepened, then spread north again as warmth returned. Predators followed. Humans, fragile yet cunning, learned to track these shifts, to anticipate the breath of the planet. They read the signs in the land, in the migration of animals, in the thickness of the ice. To fail to adapt was to vanish. Even the glaciers themselves recorded this planetary rhythm in silence. Each year, snow fell and was pressed into ice, trapping tiny bubbles of air. A year upon layer, century upon century, the record grew. Today, scientists drill into that ancient ice and find the echoes of Earth's breath, the rise and fall of carbon dioxide, the swings of temperature, the sudden jolts of warming and cooling. The ice speaks, if we know how to listen. So what does this rhythm mean for us? It is easy to imagine the Ice Age as something distant, sealed off in history. But its pulse continues. The patterns that once sculpted the world remain at work even now, shifting Earth's climate on scales too vast for any single human life to grasp. The Ice Age teaches us a humbling truth. Our world is not fixed. It moves. It breathes. It responds to forces, both cosmic and earthly, forces so immense that even mountains bow before them. If you stood on the edge of a glacier during the height of the Ice Age, you might have heard it. The faint groan of shifting ice, the low crack echoing for miles. That sound was not just ice moving. It was the sound of Earth's breath, slow and powerful, carving the land and shaping the fate of every living thing. The question that lingers is this: if the planet's breath could freeze continents and drown entire coastlines, what might its next exhale bring? The Ice Age may appear to us as a slow-moving saga, glaciers crawling across continents over thousands of years. But hidden within that long march of time were moments of sudden violence, moments when the world shifted not in millennia, but in days. The cold was not always steady. Sometimes it broke into chaos. Imagine a volcanic mountain, silent beneath its icy crown. Then, without warning, it erupts. Fire bursts forth into a frozen sky. Ash billows upward, blotting out the sun. Across vast distances, sunlight dims. Crops fail. Grass withers. Herds of animals wander into barren land, their food gone. For humans, fire once meant warmth and safety. But when the Earth's own fire tore through the Ice Age skies, it meant famine, collapse, and migration. Volcanic eruptions were among the great wildcards of the Ice Age. They could plunge regions into sudden chill, adding fresh weight to the grip of glaciers. They could coat snow and ice in dark ash, causing it to melt faster, feeding floods. Each eruption was a reminder. The Earth's stability was an illusion, and its forces could turn hostile without warning. But volcanoes were not the only engines of disruption. Deep in the oceans, invisible currents carried heat like arteries carrying blood. When those currents shifted, climates transformed. Entire coastlines could freeze or thaw, depending on whether warm water flowed toward them or away. A single change in the great conveyor belt of the seas could tip the balance of the Ice Age, turning meadows into deserts, rivers into frozen highways. And then there were the floods. Few forces in history compare to the moment when a glacial dam gives way. Imagine it, an ice wall taller than skyscrapers, holding back a lake larger than entire seas. The weight of the water strains and groans against its prison. Cracks spread through the ice. Then, with a thunderous roar, the wall collapses. Water bursts forth, not as a river, but as a tidal wave of destruction. Torrents rush across the land at unimaginable speeds, tearing forests from the ground, grinding boulders into dust, carving new valleys in hours. Entire landscapes are erased and rewritten in a single day. These were not gentle floods. They were continent-shaping cataclysms. Some scientists believe that when the largest of these ice-dammed lakes broke, they unleashed more water than all the rivers on Earth combined. In their wake, ancient channels remain, scars of chaos still visible to us thousands of years later. For the creatures of the Ice Age, these moments were trials of survival. Herds that once roamed predictable grasslands suddenly found their paths cut off by floods or buried beneath ash. Predators followed their prey into strange new territories, forcing new rivalries and hunts. And humans? We were small then, scattered bands with fragile shelters and crude tools. Yet we endured. When volcanoes darkened the skies, we searched for new food. When floods erased our camps, we moved. When the land itself seemed to twist beneath our feet, we adapted. But adaptation came with a price. Every disruption pushed life to its limits. Some species could not keep up. The saber-toothed cats, masters of ambush, found their prey dwindling. Massive beasts, once rulers of the plains, struggled as their food vanished. Extinction walked hand in hand with chaos. For humans, however, chaos was both an enemy and a teacher. The Ice Age's sudden jolts demanded creativity. We learned to follow the herds more closely, to read the signs of the sky and the ice. We crafted new tools, new strategies, new ways of surviving the cold's unpredictable grip. It is no coincidence that in the midst of this turmoil, human culture began to flourish. Art, symbols, and stories etched into caves, as if to make sense of the Earth's shifting moods. Step back and see the pattern. The Ice Age was not a frozen still life, but a stage of constant upheaval. Eruptions, currents, and floods reshaped the land, forcing migrations that spread humans and animals alike across the continents. Without these sudden trials, would humanity have spread so far or learned to endure so much? Think of it. Rivers where none had flowed, valleys carved in days, species erased in silence, and humans wandering into new frontiers. Out of chaos, the world was remade again and again. The Ice Age was more than a season of cold. It was a crucible. And inside that crucible, under fire and flood, humans learned resilience. We became wanderers, innovators, survivors. But the question remains, were we shaped by the cold itself, or by the chaos that shattered it? The Ice Age was a kingdom of giants. Towering mammoths with curved tusks, saber-toothed cats with their dagger-like fangs, and dire wolves roaming in packs across endless plains. For tens of thousands of years, these creatures ruled the frozen world. But no reign lasts forever. As the climate shifted, The foundations of their kingdom began to crumble. Glaciers that had loomed like frozen mountains for ages began to retreat. Rivers once locked beneath ice surged again across the land. Forests crept back into territories they had long abandoned, pushing aside the endless grasslands that had fed vast herds. The world was warming, and in that warmth, the giants found themselves strangers in a changing land. Imagine the mammoth, built for a frozen age. A thick coat of shaggy fur, a layer of fat to ward off the cold, and teeth designed to grind tough, frozen grasses. Now picture that same creature in a world where the ice melts, where forests expand, and where grasslands shrink. What once was strength becomes weakness. Mammoths wandered further, desperate for food, their numbers dwindling as their ancient pastures vanished. And it wasn't just the mammoths. Saber-toothed cats, once the apex predators of the steppes, faced the same decline. Their hunting style, ambush, a powerful leap, a sudden strike, depended on the wide herds of giant herbivores. As those herds thinned, so too did the saber-tooth's chance at survival. Even their magnificent fangs, so fearsome in an age of abundance, became useless weapons in a land that no longer sustained their prey. Dire wolves, larger and more powerful than the gray wolves we know today, suffered the same fate. They were built to bring down giant prey, working together in packs to topple mammoths or bison. But when the giants fell, the dire wolves could not adapt. Their smaller cousins, the gray wolves, proved more flexible. All hunters, smaller animals and thriving where the titans perished. The giants of the Ice Age were falling, and they were not falling alone. Another force was on the rise, a new predator, clever and relentless, spreading across the continents with tools, fire, and strategy. That predator was us. Early humans had always lived in the shadows of the great beasts. We were not the strongest, nor the fastest, but we were observers, innovators, and above all, cooperators. Where one human could not face a mammoth, a group of hunters could. With spears hardened by fire, with traps dug into the earth, and with patience stretching over days, humans brought down the very giants that had once seemed untouchable. For mammoths, the danger did not come from a single spear. It came from persistence. Hunters would stalk a herd for miles, driving them toward rivers or cliffs, exhausting them until the giants fell. The kill was not just meat, it was clothing, tools, shelter, even art carved into ivory. To early humans, the mammoth was both prey and provider, a living foundation for survival. The giants, already strained by climate change, now faced a second blow, relentless human ingenuity. And so, in the space of a few thousand years, an instant in geological time, the Ice Age giants vanished. Mammoths disappeared from vast continents, surviving only in a few isolated islands before fading entirely. Saber-toothed cats fell silent, their fangs no longer flashing across the plains. Dire wolves, too, passed into memory. The Ice Age ended not with a single event, but with a wave of extinctions that reshaped the living world. Where once the earth echoed with the thunder of mammoth herds, now forests grew. Where predators once stalked giants, new species emerged, smaller, more adaptable, filling the empty spaces left behind. And through it all, humans expanded. We spread across continents, our numbers rising, our skills sharpening. The fall of the giants opened space for us to flourish, but it also left behind questions that still haunt us today. Did we drive them to extinction with our relentless hunts? Or did the warming climate push them past the edge, leaving us only to finish the story? Or was it both, nature and humanity, intertwined in a tragedy of inevitability? The bones of mammoths still lie buried in frozen ground, their tusks curling like pale crescents of the moon. The fangs of saber-tooths rest in museum cases, silent reminders of a vanished age. They whisper a truth that is both haunting and humbling. No creature, no matter how mighty, is safe from change. The Ice Age ended with the fall of its giants, and in their absence, a new power rose, the power of humankind. But this raises one final, unsettling question. If even the great mammoths and saber-tooths could not survive the shifting of climate and the rise of humans, what does that mean for us in the ages still to come? The Ice Age may have ended thousands of years ago, but its fingerprints are everywhere. Every time we step outside, every time we look at a lake, a valley, or even the soil beneath our feet, we are walking across the echoes of ice. Imagine North America without the Great Lakes, those vast inland seas holding nearly 1/5 of all the planet's fresh water, exist because glaciers once scoured the land. Mile-thick rivers of ice carved out deep basins, grinding the rock beneath them like colossal chisels. When the glaciers melted, they filled those basins with water, leaving behind the shimmering lakes we know today. They are not just scenic wonders, they are living reservoirs of an ancient, frozen age. And the Great Lakes are not alone. Across Europe, the rolling hills of Scandinavia, the fertile plains of northern Germany, the gentle slopes of New England, all of these landscapes were sculpted by ice. Where glaciers once dragged their frozen bellies across the land, they left behind thick blankets of sediments, dust, gravel, and clay, scraped from mountains, ground down by unimaginable pressure, spread across the earth as the ice retreated. What seems like ordinary farmland today is, in fact, a gift from the Ice Age. The soils that nourish crops, the fields that sustain billions, were prepared not by human hands, but by the slow grinding patience of glaciers. Even our rivers owe their courses to the age of ice. The torrents of meltwater, unleashed as the ice sheets collapsed, gouged channels across the continents. Many of the rivers we see today, the Mississippi winding through America, or the Rhine cutting across Europe, are flowing along paths first etched by those catastrophic floods. They are not merely waterways. They are monuments to the power of melting ice. But the Ice Age is not gone. Not entirely. In the far north, it still clings to the earth in silence. Permafrost, frozen ground that has endured for tens of thousands of years, locks away the remains of that ancient world. In Siberia, Alaska, and northern Canada, the earth itself is a time capsule. When the permafrost thaws, the past rises to the surface. The bones of mammoths with their tusks still gleaming, fragments of Ice Age plants, even bacteria that have slept in frozen soil since before human civilization began. Each discovery is not just a relic, it's a reminder that the Ice Age is never far away, and the echoes reach even deeper. The very crust of our planet still remembers the weight of the vanished glaciers. During the Ice Age, miles of ice pressed down on continents, bending the earth itself. Now, freed of that crushing burden, the land is rising again, millimeter by millimeter, century by century. In Scandinavia, in Canada, in parts of Siberia, the ground is literally lifting, as though the earth is slowly taking a breath after holding it for far too long. This phenomenon, known as isostatic rebound, is one of the quietest but most enduring legacies of the Ice Age. Pause for a moment and think about that. The glaciers have been gone for more than 10,000 years, and yet their weight is still shaping our world. Lakes shift, shorelines change, entire coastlines are reborn, not in the span of a human lifetime, but in the patience of geological time. And what about the atmosphere? The Ice Age wrote its patterns there as well. The rhythms of carbon dioxide, the cycles of warming and cooling, the dance of ocean currents and winds, all were tuned by the glaciers. Even the storms that sweep across our skies today carry echoes of the systems born in that frozen age. But perhaps the most haunting legacy of the Ice Age is not written in stone or water or air. It is written in life itself. Consider the bison still grazing the plains of North America. They are not newcomers. They are survivors, direct descendants of the herds that once moved alongside mammoths. Musk oxen still trudge across the Arctic tundra, almost unchanged since the age when saber-toothed cats stalked them. Reindeer still migrate in endless cycles, following paths as old as the ice itself. And in the frozen ground, mammoths still sleep, their bones and even flesh preserved, as if waiting for the ice to whisper them back into the world. Even we carry this legacy. Our ancestors crossed land bridges exposed when seas fell, migrated across tundra, and learned to master fire, tools, and cooperation in the shadows of glaciers. Every skill we call human was sharpened against the grindstone of ice. So, is the Ice Age truly over? Or does it live on, hidden in landscapes, embedded in the soil, locked within our very bones? The truth is that the Ice Age is not gone. It lingers all around us, written in every valley, every lake, every fossil, every rising coastline. It lingers in our food, in our rivers, in the animals that walk the tundra, and in the winds that sweep across the seas. The earth itself is still adjusting to that frozen burden, as if time has not yet caught up with the retreat of the ice. The Ice Age left us more than memories. It left us the world we live in. And as we walk across its legacies, we must remember, the ice may melt, but it never truly disappears. Its story is carved into the face of the earth and into us. The Ice Age has passed. Or has it? We often imagine it as a frozen chapter sealed long ago, but in truth, its echoes still ripple through the world and through us. Look closely, and you'll find that the Ice Age never truly ended. It lingers in the winds, in the animals that roam the tundra, and even in the memory carried within our very bones. Step onto the wide plains of North America, and you may spot a herd of bison grazing, their hulking frames silhouetted against the horizon. These animals are more than symbols of wilderness. They are survivors. Their ancestors walked alongside mammoths, musk oxen, and dire wolves. They endured the bitter winters of the Pleistocene, the endless blizzards, the lean seasons. To see them today is to glimpse the Ice Age alive before your eyes. In the Arctic, musk oxen still roam, shaggy, resilient, and unchanged. They look as though they've stepped out of an ancient painting, their long coats swaying with every step, their hooves crunching the frozen earth. Reindeer, too, known as caribou in North America, carry the torch of the frozen past. Year after year, they migrate across tundra and taiga, following paths etched not just by instinct, but by an inheritance older than human memory. These migrations are not simply habits. They are living echoes of a world shaped by ice and wind. But the legacy of the Ice Age isn't just found in animals. It is written into the story of humanity itself. Imagine our ancestors, small bands of hunter-gatherers moving across a land far colder and harsher than most of us will ever know. They followed herds across the Mammoth steppe, crossed exposed land bridges where oceans now lie, and carved out a life in a world where survival was never guaranteed. The skills they forged in that crucible still define us today. Fire was not merely warmth, it was survival. Tools carved from stone and bone were not just inventions. They were lifelines. Cooperation, storytelling, and strategy, those human traits we now take for granted, were sharpened in the icy winds of the Pleistocene. Without the cold to test us, would we have learned to endure? Would we have become who we are? Even migration itself, our restless drive to explore new lands, was shaped by the Ice Age. As glaciers locked away water, sea levels fell, revealing new frontiers. Humanity crossed into the Americas, spread across Eurasia, and reached the far corners of the world. The map of human history was drawn not in ink, but in ice. Yet the Ice Age lingers not only in animals or ancient migrations. It still whispers in the landscapes around us. The smooth hills of New England, the fertile plains of Europe, the deep basins of the Great Lakes. These are the fingerprints of glaciers. The soil that feeds our crops was laid down by retreating ice. The rivers that wind across continents were carved by torrents of meltwater. Every field, every valley, every shoreline carries the mark of a frozen past. And sometimes, when winter descends, we feel it too. The sharp bite of icy air, the stillness of snow-covered ground, the long nights that demand fire and fellowship, they are reminders of a time when such conditions were not seasons, but centuries. Our instinct to gather, to warm ourselves, to endure. These are ancient reflexes, echoes of survival strategies that stretch back tens of thousands of years. The Ice Age, then, is not simply history. It is not something that ended when the glaciers retreated. It is a presence, lingering in the world and within us. Think about this. Without the Ice Age, would bison still roam the plains? Would humanity have crossed into the Americas? Would our cultures have been shaped by the necessity of fire, food storage, and community? The frozen past is not distant. It is the prologue to the present. And perhaps the greatest lesson the Ice Age leaves us is this: the Earth is never still. Climates shift, ecosystems transform, and life adapts. Entire worlds can vanish, yet leave behind seeds that grow into the next chapter. The Ice Age may feel like it belongs to the past, but in truth, it shaped everything we see today. So the next time you feel the chill of winter wind, pause. The cold you feel is more than just weather. It is a faint echo of a time when ice ruled the world. A reminder that we are not separate from that frozen age, but its descendants, its inheritors. The Ice Age lives on, in the landscapes, in the animals, in the stories of our ancestors, and deep within us. The Ice Age is not gone. It is still here, etched into the earth, whispered in the wind, and carried in the memory of life itself. Not an ending, but a beginning. Not silence, but a voice that still speaks. And if we listen closely, we can still hear it, the Ice Age within us.